Hello again, this is Dr. Jenkins. We are back for part 2 of the digestion video. Just to refresh your memory, make sure we're all on the same page here. We started by going through the functions of the digestive system, and then we talked about the digestive tract versus accessory organs. Remember, the digestive tract is the direct path that food takes through the body, looks like that. And then there are accessory organs such as the liver, gallbladder, and then the pancreas is behind the stomach. They're accessory organs because food does not directly pass through them, yet they still play an important role in the digestive system. So we worked our way all the way down from the oral cavity to the pharynx to the esophagus to the stomach through the small intestine. Now we have gotten to the large intestine. So remember, it was in the small intestine. The small intestine is here in the middle. The small intestine is narrower in diameter, but very long, versus the large intestine. Maybe I'll use, versus the large intestine, which is larger in diameter, but shorter. Also, the small intestine, that is where we completed chemical digestion of all the nutrients, and that is where we absorb the nutrients. So by the time we get from the small intestine to the large intestine, which by the way happens over here, by the time we get to the large intestine, pretty much everything that we wanted to absorb has already been absorbed. So what's left is a lot of waste that we're going to poop out, or things that are undigestible. There's some undigestible fiber that we don't absorb, yet still plays an important role, for example, in helping to move food things through our digestive tract. Okay, so in terms of the structure, the large intestine does have 5 different regions. I've listed them there: cecum, ascending, transverse, descending, sigmoid. They're listed here. You do not have to know them. If you're wondering, some people are curious, if you're wondering, the cecum is the beginning region. So this is the closest to where the small intestine meets the large intestine. That's the cecum. This is considered the ascending portion because whatever is left is moving up. We have the transverse section because food stuff or waste is moving transversely. And then we have the descending colon because whatever is left is moving down. And then the very end, right before we get to the rectum, is the sigmoid colon. But you don't have to know them. What I would rather talk about, again, I'm pausing to drink. What I would like you to know are the functions. So the important functions that we're going to talk about of the large intestine to form poop. Okay, so as I said, the small intestine is where we will absorb all those good nutrients into the blood. So by the time we get to the large intestine, what's left? Waste and things that are undigestible. And most of that waste and undigestible stuff we're going to excrete as poop. Also, in the large intestine, we can absorb, also in the small intestine, we can absorb some vitamins. So some vitamins will be absorbed from the large intestine into the bloodstream. And also, this is where we reabsorb a ton of water. You know, our body likes to recycle. So your body doesn't want to get rid of water if it can be used. So a lot of water. Sorry about these. I thought I turned my phone onto airplane mode, but I guess I didn't turn my, let me see if I can do this real quick while you're on here, because I don't think you need to be seeing my text messages. Okay. Let's do airplane mode. All right. Perfect. Then we're just going to go back. Okay. So there's a lot of water left over. If you remember, we had to add saliva to the food stuff. We added a lot of digestive enzymes, and there's water in there. Well, we don't want to poop it out if it can be reused by the body. You know, a normal healthy poop, sorry to just talk about it, but it's true. A normal healthy poop is semi-solid, not super watery. And the reason that it's not super watery is because in the large intestine, we reabsorb a lot of water back into the bloodstream. Okay. All right. As we get towards the end of the large intestine, so remember, whatever is left, foods, waste products, undigestible food, travels up, across, down, and then over. We've reabsorbed water, we've reabsorbed some vitamins, and we have formed poop. Well, what's that poop? Where's it going to go? Into the rectum. The rectum is the holding tank for the poop. And of course, the anus is the exit hole. The anus is really a hole. So when we choose to, we release that poop. Okay? Now, I mentioned this before, if you remember, when we talked about the esophagus and the stomach. There was a sphincter. Remember, a sphincter is a thickening of muscle. Of course, lining all of our GI organs is muscle. Like if we look down here, let's go with yellow. Our GI organs are lined with muscle. All of them, really. But there are some areas where it's thicker. And we have two sphincters down here. You don't need to know them specifically by name. You don't. But I'm just pointing out that they're there. So another example where we have a thickening of muscle on both sides. And what's interesting, this will not be on your lab quiz, this won't be on a quiz or a midterm exam. But what's interesting is that we have an internal and an external one. And guess what? One of them is smooth muscle. Smooth muscle means that it's involuntarily controlled. And then the other one is skeletal muscle, which is voluntarily controlled. This will not be on any quiz, but it's just interesting. So in other words, that internal anal sphincter, this will stay contracted without us having to remember. So it holds your poop in, which is good, involuntarily. And then, and only when, under normal circumstances, then and only when that you want to voluntarily poop, you will contract the skeletal sphincter. So it's a nice combination of involuntary and voluntary. Okay, I always like to include the Bristol stool chart. You don't need to know this, my friends. You don't need to know it. But, you know, we can tell a lot about how the body is working by what the poop looks like. So if the poop's not right, it's telling us something very important about what's going on with our body. There's a problem. So I'm just going to throw a question out. Hopefully you're still awake. I mean, this video just started, so you should be. But what do you think normal poop would look like? We have types 1 through 7. What do you think normal poop would look like? I'm not going to ask you this on a test or a quiz or whatever, but it's there. If you're wondering, next time, have a look. It should be like a sausage, but with cracks on its surface. Or like a sausage or a snake, smooth and soft. Ha-ha! All right, so we just took our journey through the digestive tract, right? From the mouth to the pharynx to the esophagus, stomach, small intestine, large intestine, rectum, anus. That is the GI tract. Now we're going to step outside the GI tract and talk about those accessory organs. Even though food does not pass directly through them, let me say that again, even though food does not pass directly through them, they still play an important role in the digestive system. So we have 3 main accessory organs: pancreas, liver, gallbladder. What they share, what they have in common, is that they produce and or release important secretions. Mostly what we're talking about is enzymes, things that speed up chemical digestion of nutrients. Let's take one by one. Okay, let's first talk about the pancreas. It is behind the stomach. If you look back through some of those pictures, it's hard to see because this yellow oblong thing, as we see in the picture, it's behind the stomach. It has two main functions. It functions in the digestive system, but it also functions in the endocrine system. We're going to focus on the digestive system. The digestive function of the pancreas is that it releases digestive enzymes. Boom. That is its digestive function, releases digestive enzymes. And those enzymes, they're produced out here in the pancreas. Those enzymes take a trip down this duct and look at where they're released into, the duodenum. Remember, the duodenum is the beginning of the small intestine. So earlier, we had food stuff coming into the mouth, pharynx, esophagus, stomach, small intestine. The place where we can begin to chemically digest all the nutrients is the duodenum. Why can we do chemical digestion of all the nutrients in the duodenum? Because we now have the enzymes. It would not be possible to chemically digest everything before the duodenum because we don't have the digestive enzymes. Now, as a side function, the pancreas also releases hormones, insulin and glucagon, that will not be on a test, but it's just there as an FYI because it is really important. All right, so the pancreas behind the stomach secretes digestive enzymes into the duodenum, and that allows the small intestine to chemically digest all nutrients. Next, we have the liver. The liver hangs out in the upper right part of the abdomen. The pancreas was back here behind the stomach. On the other side, we have the liver. And of course, the little green doohickey on the underside of the liver is the gallbladder. Okay, so you should just know the liver is in the upper right side of the abdomen. And we always talk about right or left as what it would be on that person. So this is this person's right side. Therefore, the liver is in the upper right quadrant. Now, if you look below, you don't need to know this picture. You don't need to know it. I just wanted to give you an idea, microscopically, about what the liver looks like. And one of its unique features, it is really vascular. Holy moly. Look at all these blood vessels. All the blue. Blood vessels. It is very vascular. Tons of blood vessels coursing through it. We even have blood vessels on the side. Here's a main artery, main vein in blue. So this helps the liver do its job, which one of its jobs is to filter the blood. But I'm just pointing out it's very vascular. You don't need to know the structure in particular, just showing you a picture and pointing it out. We're going to lay out, I believe, 3 liver functions. The first function of the liver is that it produces bile. Bile is an enzyme, really. Bile is something that is needed to break down fats, to chemically break down fats. So not only do fats need certain enzymes like lipase, right? Not only do fat need certain enzymes, they also need bile. Liver produces bile, which helps to chemically break down fats. Not carbs or protein, but fats. A second function is what I'm going to call metabolic regulation. I'm talking about the liver here. But I think there's 2 things I want to point out. One thing, after nutrients are absorbed, nutrients first go to the liver. So we bring in that food. It tastes so yummy. We bring in that food. It goes down the mouth, trachea, esophagus, down to the stomach, which leads to the small intestine. And as we know, it is in the small intestine where those nutrients are absorbed into the bloodstream. Well, after nutrients are absorbed into the bloodstream, where do they go? Liver. So immediately after absorption into the bloodstream, where does that nutrient-rich blood go? Liver. Always, always, always. That nutrient-rich blood goes to the liver. And guess what? The liver decides what nutrients stay in the bloodstream versus what nutrients are stored. Excuse me. See, when we eat a meal, we don't need to keep all the sugar from that meal in our bloodstream right away. You have a big plate of spaghetti. We don't need all those carbs, all those sugars in your bloodstream right away. So the liver, it will keep some glucose in the bloodstream, and then it will store some of that glucose as glycogen for later. This is why it's possible for us to not eat for 6 hours and still be alive. If you don't eat for 6 hours, your body's not getting a steady stream of blood glucose. But no worries, because your body can go to the liver and it can pull some of the stored sugar off the storage shelves. So this regulation is a part of the liver. 2 points to make here, right? Once nutrients are absorbed into the bloodstream in the small intestine, where do those nutrients go first? Liver. The nutrients that were just absorbed first go to the liver. One of the things the liver does with those nutrients is it decides how much of those nutrients to keep in the blood versus how much of them to store for later. The liver does help to detoxify alcohol, but we're going to talk about that in a whole nother chapter. All right. I had mentioned there was going to be 3 functions. We'll just go with the 2. The third function of filtering out and detoxifying we'll talk about with the alcohol chapter. So cool. We have this liver, upper right quadrant, pretty big, very vascular. It produces bile, which will go on to help to chemically break down fats. And it also is the first place where recently absorbed nutrients go. And the liver decides what nutrients to keep in the blood versus what nutrients to store for later. Really quickly for this one, the gallbladder. It is on the underside of the liver, a little green dude. And pretty much it stores bile because the liver produces bile. So the liver is producing bile out here and out here. Some of that bile is stored right in the liver, but some of that bile goes to the gallbladder where it's stored. And then when we need it, we got more right there. Okay, you don't have to know these times. I ended up adding this because so many people asked. I think one thing that surprises people is how quickly food gets from the mouth down to the stomach. It doesn't take very long. Likewise, people are often surprised at how long it takes for the whole process, but you don't need to know these. I put together some reviews to try and make it easier. As I said, for all the digestive organs, basic structure and function. Here is the structure and function of the accessory organs. Okay. Don't worry about this. Just go back to what we've already talked about. Don't worry about this slide. Okay. Couple odds and ends to finish out this chapter. One of them is we have to talk about enzymes. We have to. enzymes are these proteins. So we have all these little proteins zooming around in our bloodstream. And what they do is they speed up chemical reactions, including digestion. As a matter of fact, we wouldn't be able to live without these enzymes. They're so important. They speed up chemical reactions to a point where we can actually get them done fast enough to keep our body going. Now, theoretically, a chemical reaction could still happen without an enzyme, but the reactions would happen so slowly that it wouldn't be able to have our body keep up with its needs. So they are absolutely vital. Small proteins that speed up or catalyze chemical reactions. We already talked about this. Mechanical digestion is to break down using mechanical force, like chewing. Chemical digestion is to break down food through chemicals, meaning enzymes. Some characteristics of these enzymes. They're pretty important little creatures. First of all, enzymes are specific. Each enzyme can only work on a specific, what we call substrate. For example, lipase is only an enzyme that can help speed up chemical reactions with fat. Protease. Protease is an enzyme that can only be used to speed up chemical reactions of protein. That's called specificity. And it may be like a lock and key, what you see down here, where literally the shape of the protein or the fat or the carbs must be fit into exactly by the right enzyme. Specificity. Enzymes are reusable. That's a fantastic thing. They can leave a chemical reaction and they can be reused. We love that. Enzymes usually end in the suffix ase. Amylase, lipase, protease, lactase. Here are some examples of the enzymes that work on these, but you do not need to know the enzymes. Just another characteristic that they usually end in ASE. Okay. Now, as we get towards the end here, I do want to go quickly over some specific differences between how we digest and absorb carbs versus fats versus protein. Now, the basic process is the same. We bring in a nutrient, we mechanically break it down, we chemically break it down into its smallest pieces, and then and only then are we able to absorb those nutrients through the small intestine wall into the bloodstream. That nutrient-rich blood then goes to the liver, and the liver decides how much of those nutrients to keep in the blood versus how many of those nutrients to store for later. So we can go over a lot of things, but I'm only going to point out the most important. Carbohydrates are our fastest energy source, the easiest to break down, the easiest to metabolize. Carbs. If we need quick energy, the way to go is carbs. Proteins. We talked about something unique about proteins is that we begin chemical digestion in the stomach. Overall, protein is a more complex nutrient and therefore it takes longer to break down. Then we have fats. Some of the unique things about fats. It requires bile. I didn't include this before, but I want to include it now. Small intestine wall. We saw it before. The small intestine wall has villi, this is the inside of the small intestine wall, and this is the outside facing the blood. So, once let me put green, in each little villus of the blood, there's a vertical structure called a lacteal. Surrounding the lacteal would be arteries and veins. So what happens is when we absorb, now we remember that, or maybe let's just make sure we understand, when we absorb carbs, we absorb carbs from inside the small intestine through the villi into the bloodstream. We absorb into blood. It is the same thing that we're going to find out with protein. Fat is different. Fat, we have to absorb. Let's see a different color here. Fats, we have to absorb into the lacteal. So we absorb the carbs and the protein into the bloodstream, and we absorb fat into a lymphatic vessel called a lacteal. Eventually, that lacteal will bring the fat to the bloodstream. But initially, fats are absorbed into the lacteals. So, something unique about fats. It is absorbed into the lacteals. That's different from carbs and protein, which are absorbed into the bloodstream. The lacteals will eventually lead to the bloodstream. It's just an added step. And even though fat takes longer to break down, absorb, and metabolize, once we're able to metabolize it, fat gives us the most energy. Our cells like to burn fat for energy because it gives them a lot of energy. It just takes longer to get to. So we have the best of both worlds. Carbs for quick energy, and then fat eventually, and that gives us a ton of more energy. All right. Again, really quick, what are some things that are unique about digestion and absorption of vitamins and minerals? Something that I'm going to point out, vitamins do not get broken down in the same way as other nutrients. We have to break down carbs, fat, and protein into their smallest pieces. But when it comes to vitamins, we're able to absorb them without having to break them down. They're already small enough. The rest of the information here is all extra. That's just one particular difference I'm pointing out now. Digestion, the digestive system doesn't work alone. It works with other systems. You don't have to know these, but as we go through the semester, here and there, I'll be talking about other body systems because the digestive system doesn't work alone. Okay, the end here is just some disorders that could occur around the digestive system. I want to make a point, and I would like you to know this. So we talked about the stool chart, didn't we? And we said types 3 and 4 would be considered quote-unquote normal poop. Well, what if you're up here? If your poop is too runny, there's a lot of water. Because remember, we want our large intestine, we want our large intestine to be able to reabsorb water back into the body, which means that we're not pooping it out. Sometimes, I have this backward. Got the diarrhea backwards. Look at me. Oh, no, that's right. Yeah. I'm having a rough go of it lately with these videos. Thank you for your patience. So, constipation, right. And then diarrhea is down here. Let's take one at a time here. If you are constipated, most often, food is spending too much time in the GI tract. So if you spend too much food in the GI tract for whatever reason, too much fiber holding it up, stress, I don't know, then your large intestine is going to reabsorb more water than usual. And if too much is reabsorbed because things are spending too long in the large intestine, then it means that what comes out as poop is going to be harder because you've reabsorbed too much water. Then the opposite is true. If food moves too quickly, think about food poisoning. If you eat something that doesn't agree with you, it's going to move right through you. So the large intestine isn't reabsorbing enough. Therefore, we're pooping out a lot of that water. Our poop is more watery than usual because our large intestine didn't have the chance to reabsorb it. You can read about heartburn and acid in Digestion. I'm not going to go over it. We have enough to know. You can also read about ulcers, particularly a peptic ulcer, when hydrochloric acid from the stomach comes back up the digestive tract, burns the lining of your esophagus, but you don't need to know those. Focus on the GI organs and the accessory organs, structure and function. All right, folks, another good video. I'll see you next time.